Okay, so we're sharing in the group now. So thanks everyone who joins in today. Want to welcome you all to Helen Fitzgerald, and thanks Helen for joining us. So
Thank you,
um,
Jackie, and hello.
Helen's a best-selling author of 10 adult and young adult thrillers, including The Donor and The Cry, which was longlisted for the Sexton's Old Peculiar Crime Novel of the Year, and is now a major drama for BBC. Helen has worked as a criminal justice social worker for over 15 years, and she grew up in Kilmore, Victoria, in Australia, and she now lives in Glasgow with her husband. So her latest book is Ash Mountain, which I've just been reading, and the first time I've read one of your books and really enjoyed it. I'd say it's a really good thriller.
Yay.
And just want to mention as well, thanks to Affirm Press, we have some copies of Ash Mountain to give away. So, people watching, if you want to ask a question to Helen, I'll be choosing some people who ask questions to win a copy of the book. So, thanks so much for joining us. Is there something more you'd like to tell us about yourself or about Ash Mountain?
Well, I'm Australian. Obviously, I was born in Kilmore near Melbourne, and I lived there and in Melbourne for 23 years, and then went travelling. So I'm over here in Scotland, and I have been for the last 23 years. So it's kind of like half and half, and I'm starting to feel a little bit more Scottish now than I used to, but definitely still Australian. But yeah, I've been away from home a long time, and when I was travelling, I didn't have any intention of staying here. I wanted to go home, but I fell in love, like a lot of people accidentally do in their 20s. So here I am in a suburb in Glasgow, and you said I was living with my husband. I am, and he's still not very nice. I still like him a lot, but our kids have just left home. So we're empty nesters now. We're selling our house and downsizing and
Oh.
going into the city to try and be groovy again. So basically, we're both writers. We met kind of courting about writing, and we both started writing like when we met. And he's a film and TV writer and writes, a lot. He's constantly working, and I've been sort of on and off. It was always my hobby and my joy. So it's joy. So it's been kind of weird not having a hobby and a joy, but having it as a job. So I've kind of been juggling that a little bit and going back to work every now and again because I get sick of doing, just the writing thing.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about Ash Mountain?
Yeah, it's basically I had wanted to start. I usually write family drama and I throw a thriller at it, usually,
Mm.
or another sort of genre. This time I wrote a family drama about a woman called Fran. She's 45. She spent all of her life either looking after her children and now she's going home to Ash Mountain, this little country town near Melbourne, which is kind of similar to Kilmore where I grew up, to look after her father. So I wanted to write about a town and a woman returning to the town because I've
Mm.
never done that actually. I haven't been back to my hometown for
Oh,
about 30
wow.
years.
Okay.
I know it's
Wow.
really weird. I had
Mm.
a love-hate relationship with it. So I kind of wondered about what it would feel like going back, what what would have changed about it. And then this time, instead of, I have got a bit of a thriller element in it, but I wanted to do the disaster story. So it was about a
Mm.
bushfire. It was about the people in a town, on the ground, in a town when it hits. And I wanted to sort of do the formula differently from how disaster movies are done and concentrate much more on the victims of the fire and people who are actually impacted by it.
Mm.
So that's kind of where I started from. And it's a different book from any other one that I've written, really, structurally. I do try to do something different every time. This was hard to write. I decided I didn't want to know who died at the start of the book. And that I was going to be writing this fire scene at the very end because I wanted to feel the pain of it, for the characters
Mm.
and to empathize. So I got to the point, two-thirds through the book, and I'm like, okay, I have to decide, who. And I wrote all of the names in little cards, and I had a bowl, and I said to
Oh,
my daughter,
wow.
I know it was called the death bowl. It's horrible. Said to my daughter, video while you're doing this. And I picked out, it was half the people who died. But it
Mm.
was interesting because I had thought this is going to be like a fire is, indiscriminate, just can get anyone who's there at the time. But as a writer, I realised that I'm not like a fire. I'm not, I'm not. So when I was pulling these out, it kind of clarified for me. It's like, no, that person
It
can't
can't be
die.
that.
No, So it kind of clarified for me. And then I wrote this fire scene, and it was actually the most incredible writing experience I've ever had. I think because I knew I'd been holding off for so long, and I knew it was going to be so painful. But I wrote it in about a 4-hour stretch of mania and came down the stairs and said to my husband, oh my God, like crying my eyes out. I was really sad So it was a different experience. It was also the first one that I'd set fully in Australia. And that is because my publishers never wanted me to set books in Australia initially.
Oh, really?
So yeah, 15 years ago, I was like, no, UK, much better market, all that sort of stuff. That's changing, which is great, just to see so much more Australian, New Zealand literature out and crime novels out all over the place over here now. It's big, and also TV to see that as well.
So all your books before had been set in the UK?
They had all of them except for The Devil's Staircase, which is only and The Cry, which Cry was half and half in the book. In the show, it was much more. It was kind of half and half, but it was more of Australia because it was made there. I think when the book got commissioned to be made into TV, there was talk about to get the financing from the UK and the financing from Australia, we needed the right amount of actors and the right amount of scenes set in both places. So it changed because of that. But that was the first one. Devil's Staircase, very tiny bit of Australia. The main character is Australian, but she's in London living with other Australians in a squat, and it's a serial killer story. And then The Cry, which was the TV one, which is about a couple who live in Glasgow coming back to see their parents. And so forth. Yeah.
I'm just wondering that, like, you spent your first years in Australia. When you were in Australia, were you writing then?
No, I never ever thought I could be a writer. I thought that. I mean, I loved reading books much more when I was younger. I think I'm a little bit. I have concentration problems, and so does my daughter with reading. And we've never been very good at sitting still. And I think that's probably why I go for short books and also write short books. But yeah, I can't remember what your question was. I'm going to say menopause. Follow up menopause card.
So, well, I said had you been writing in Australia, but my question.
Right, no, I hadn't.
So my question from that is, when did you actually realise that you did want to be a writer?
Well, so probably when I got published. It was kind of accidental. I met my husband in London, and he was a BBC journalist, and he wanted to be a writer. Definitely, he knew he did, and it was enjoying journalism at the time. And so we both sort of courted over writing, and I had just come out of doing a literature degree at Melbourne Uni, so I was very pretentious and all about talking about poems all the time and stuff, But I didn't really think I could write. I never had written anything. I'd never finished anything other than a story when I was 7, which was just saying that I wanted to be my mum and have 12 children. And I'm like, that's not the story I would write now. But yeah, we sort of courted over it, and he cracked out a brilliant script while he was in the caravan at our house in Kilmore just before we got married. He wrote this script, and so Serge, my husband's Italian Scottish, and his name's Sergio. He got his first film made really, really quickly, so that made me think this must be easy, So that's when I started writing when he was doing it. It was also because I was reading his scripts, I was learning the process, I was reading a lot of screenplay books actually. So my sort of teaching, I didn't go to do an MLit or anything like that, a master's in creative writing, but I did sort of go through a lot of learning and a lot of development in potential scripts for about 7 years before I tried to write a book. So I did I had scripts in development for several years and things like that. So it was a slow process, me learning how to write. I did kind of want to, because I thought it's fun when you write, but I'd never written a short story until I met my husband. And that's when I started writing, and this voice came out, and I've still got the document, and it's exactly the writing that I do now. But I didn't do anything for 20 years after that. I wrote this one half thing, and then social work, kids, all of that sort of thing, was too busy really, and I didn't know how. I didn't know how to write. So, I'm not sure I still do.
Some people must think you do.
A few.
And could you tell us a little bit about then how you got to get your first book published? Was
Mhm.
that hard or easy for you?
It was easy, but it was only easy because by then, so what happened was I'd written a screenplay called The West Highland Way, which was about a group of women doing the walk. There's this beautiful walk from Glasgow all the way up to Fort William. So I'd written
Mm,
this screenplay, and I'd written several before that get development money, from BBC Scotland. So I was making money out of writing, but getting very frustrated that absolutely nothing was getting made. Nothing got made, and nothing gets made. It's like a hit rate with screenplays and treatments and things is like one in a million,
mhm.
So, but I had a screenplay and therefore had a screenwriting agent. And when I decided, I got really close to getting one of these, the West Highland Way made. It was, in this scheme where I was one out of three to get the funding from a small budget to make this
Okay.
film. Didn't
Mm,
get made, and I said, if it doesn't get made, I'm going to try prose. And I never really thought I could write prose. I didn't know, I'd done so much screenwriting. So I went upstairs because it didn't get made. I went upstairs and I wrote and wrote and wrote like 3 days solid. It was just like I'd been swimming upstream and I turned around. The prose for me was so much easier. And I remember coming down to my husband and saying, Serge, oh my God, because I was writing a comedy, by the way. This was a comedy, The West Highland Way. And I
okay.
came downstairs and said, there's a paedophile in it and I've just killed 3 people. And he said, I'm not sure
And the
that's going to
comedy.
work, Hallie. But I stuck with it. And because I had the screenwriting agent, he knew a literary agent, and I got one straight away. And he sold it to Faber and Faber straight away. So I was really lucky. I mean,
Mm,
for $5,000, not much money, but I got published easily. And
mm,
I think because I had that low, I've always had low um, advances, and I like that because as long as you can sell the books and get royalties, it's fine.
mm,
But your publisher will drop you immediately if you're in negative, if you haven't made any money. So I was always quite happy to get those low advances, and I still am. And to have a publisher who's independent, who really puts in the effort, like a firm
mm,
do. I mean, they're amazing, and
mm,
also Arenda over here, Karen
mm.
Sullivan. So I've got these two publishers who are just completely different. So yeah, I got published really quickly, and I know that. But I had put in 10 years of slogging away as a
Before,
failure
yeah.
as a
Yeah.
screenwriter. So.
Mm, yeah. We've got a few people watching, which is great. And just reminding the people watching, if you ask a question, you'll have a chance to win a copy of Ash Mountain, thanks to Firm Press. I've got a question from Patricia. She says, do you have a strict writing regime?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Patricia, I used to, right? And crime writers do tend to have strict regimes. All of my friends, we have online competitions, first to 1,000 words.
Mm.
Oh, I don't do that because I used to try that, and I'd get to 10 words and they would have said, I've just done 10 because I cannot stop editing myself as I go along.
Mm.
So in terms of regime, my regime is more like a yearly regime than a daily regime, because the time, like, I was supposed to be over in Australia when this got published last August. So I wrote the book early in the year, do the editing then, and then comes the release of the book, and you're very busy doing PR stuff like this. And I was supposed to be coming to Australia. So usually I have a year where a third of it is writing, a third of it is PR, and a third of it is having a little bit of a nervous breakdown and saying to myself, I could never do this again. I'm never going to write another book. And my family saying to me, you say this every time. It's fine. You'll write another book. So, yeah, it's a yearly regime, I would say, rather than
Mm,
daily. And when I have that writing period, that's, I do a lot of research. I do a lot of research, and I do a lot of note taking of one-liners, I think my characters would say. And then I write it very much scene by scene. So, I just stick it at that one scene, and I don't let myself move on from it, because I used to rush write, I think. And that's what I'm trying
mm,
not to do now.
okay. Mm.
Mm.
And Sharon's wondering what you did before you became a writer, as you said that you studied
Mm.
literature at uni.
Yeah, I did. I did literature at university and history. When I got out, like most people who do that degree, thought, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And the only thing
Mm,
that interested me at the time was social work, because I just liked it, the idea of it. I guess it's always been something that I've been interested in. I had friends who were doing social work as well, so I, because I was indecisive and 23, instead of deciding what to do, I went off traveling, met my husband, and then thought, rightio, I need to do this postgrad in social work and have an opportunity to actually earn an income. So I applied for Glasgow and Melbourne, having just fallen in love with Serge, and got into both, and then had a dilemma of,
Oh.
do I drag him there, or
Mm.
is he dragging me here? I chose Glasgow because at the time I'd been here long enough to get a grant. So they actually kind of, at the time, Scottish education, that still is really great, is pretty much free, and back then they also gave grants. So I was so I did social work, and initially did a year of child protection social work, and nearly died, of stress, like everybody does. And then in Scotland, social work also run the corrections department, probation and parole, and you can specialise. So I specialised in that and criminal justice, and then was like supervising officer for 30 cases that you get on probation and on parole. So I did that on and off until a couple of years ago. For 25 years or 23 years. And I've loved it. It's really stressful. My book, Worst Case Scenario, is set in that job, but it's a very stressful job.
Yeah,
And
I
I
can
realised,
imagine.
I couldn't do this and that, so I needed to pick one or the other.
So, and I'm wondering from that job, like, are there experiences you've had or people that you've met who have influenced some of your writing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not allowed to tell you who or how,
No.
but just confidentiality and everything from social work. But oh my God, yes. I mean, I worked in the prison here, so for 2.5 years. It's called Barlinnie Prison in Glasgow, and it's they call it the Big Hoose,
Okay.
and it's one of the Victorian prisons, with those big old halls that smelt of a mixture of sweat and something else that I won't say on your nice. But it was just absolutely a horrible place, and I worked there for 2.5 years, and I mean, I'd get called over to the hall. Social workers were, helping vulnerable people and also helping people who are going to be released on parole and making sure that we had the right conditions in place and the right accommodation and all of that to keep it safe. But I mean, I would go over to the hall and meet 5 or 6 people a day who, with the most incredible story, each one of which I could make into a book, So my job, I definitely run out of ideas after a while after being out of the job. So I'm now I'm finding myself looking for social work jobs again. And it's not that I'm needing the material. It's something that it inspires me, meeting people and seeing what people go through. It's amazing that they tell you what they tell you, and that you meet people at a point of such crisis, when someone's going to jail or something. So, yeah. Thanks for that. That was from, I'm trying to write it down, but because I haven't got my glasses on, Sharon and Patricia, thank you very much for your questions.
Yeah. And I've got a question from Cassie. She's wondering, out of your books, which one did you find the hardest to write?
Probably it's between Ash Mountain and it's the last 2 I've written, Worst Case Scenario. And that's because I think partly I went through menopause and I was hormonally all over the place and exhausted and didn't have the energy that I used to have to focus, or the focus. I brain fog all over the place. So the hardest, worst case scenario is one. I just left the job. It's 2.5 years ago now, but I just left a job in the community supervising people on probation and parole. That was really hard because I was feeling sick. I had a huge amount of anxiety with that hormonal thing until I got my HRT. And, that really helped. So that was hard in that way. Ash Mountain was the hardest, definitely, because it was I'm not my town. I'm called it Ash Mountain, but I was writing about a town I grew up in. I started to look back on it and to Google it and to find things out about it that surprised me. I always knew that the boys' school, that there was sexual abuse going on at the boys' school. Everybody whispered about that. We knew priests got moved from the church to somewhere else. We knew that the borders, because it's a big boys' boarding school in our town, and that's one huge element of this book, that a little town with a little population of 1,000 people, and you plonk 900 vulnerable, sexually repressed, and then some of them abused boys in a school with a town with a normal population of gender-wise. It was a really hostile and terrifying place to live for me. I felt that way. I didn't want to go down the street. The borders were terrifying. And it was while I was writing the book that I realised, the borders were terrifying, but they were the ones going back to the school where the abusers were. I was going home to a safe house, So I started to feel much sorrier for the borders when I was writing this book, about. I don't know if anyone noticed, but I didn't even name them. I gave them numbers: border one,
Mm,
border two. That's how I
mm,
saw them as a teenage girl growing up in
yeah,
Kilmore.
yeah,
So it was
that was
hard
really
because I was worried about
interesting.
upsetting
Yeah.
my townspeople, and I think I did upset the schools changed a lot, so
Mm,
it was hardest because I was nervous about it. I'm nervous about writing about that stuff,
mm,
um, and I think it has a deeper significance for me. I grew up there. There's something about where you grew up and where you were formed
mm,
that holds huge significance, and is for me writing it in an Australian setting comes out much easier and better than when I'm writing Scotland. So
mm,
I'm going to keep at I'll do a bit of both. But there's
yeah.
something about writing about where you grew up that, yeah, for me was really really significant.
Mm. And have you had people from your town contact you after you've written the book?
Well, I only had somebody say the head teacher's really annoyed, the principal's really annoyed with you, or you've given her a nightmare. I mean, I think she's done a great job there of
Mm,
making sure that this kind of thing isn't happening again. But otherwise, not really, which worried me. So that's why I was like, ooh, I thought it's we didn't talk about it. Everyone knew this stuff was going on,
yeah.
and at my family didn't talk. We didn't talk about it. And even if I asked a friend, everything was hush hush. It was that kind of environment. So even now, to talk about sexual abuse in my town, and to talk about
Mm,
boarders who also sexually assaulted girls and got them pregnant and scared us to death.
mm,
It's really nerve wracking for me to do. But
mm,
there it is. I've done it.
yeah. And Sharon's got a question about The Cry. So
Yeah.
we know that it was like it's been a hit TV series. She said, did someone approach you, or was that something you were trying to push for it to become a TV series?
Well, yeah, it was a really good question, because actually, you know what I was saying before I started out as screenwriting? Well, because of that, I had
Mm,
met producers. I did know people, and also my husband had become a little bit glamorous. So we were going to things like the not very glamorous Scottish BAFTAs, but I'm sorry anyone from the Scottish BAFTAs, but things like that. But at the Scottish BAFTAs with Serge one night, I got really drunk and I met this woman, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I've just written this book," and I told her about it. It was dead lovely. And she was working with Claire Mundell, who is Synchronicity Films, and she said, "Claire wants to meet you tomorrow," right? So,
mm,
so I went and met Claire the day after, and she optioned my very first book 13 years ago. So we tried to get that off the ground. She
okay.
optioned my second book. We
Mm,
tried to get that off the ground. No,
mm,
we don't want an Australian setting. What is this comedy? How can you have comedy in something that's so dark? Blah, 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 blah. Then The Devil's Staircase, which was more of a serial killer, but it was Aussies in London. We couldn't get that right. We didn't get that off the ground. And then Claire optioned The Cry, which is great. And she managed to get it off the ground. So I think it was all about the book did well, sort of critically, so it was easier to get a good
mm,
writer. And the
mm,
big turning point, because Claire and I had been at this for years trying, and Claire's been making other things, obviously, but the big coup is getting the writer that works with it. And I didn't want to try the screenwriting. I know how many meetings you have to go to,
yeah.
and I can't stand how long it takes to decide something. And I also take on too many opinions at meetings like that. But we got Jacqueline Perskay, and she was the script writer. And so as soon as she was on board and wrote a script, it went. And I think she did such a good job.
Yeah, yeah. And so what involvement did you said you didn't do the script writing. What did you have any involvement in the TV series?
No, not really. I said at the time, I think that might have been my menopausal stage. I said I
Mm,
didn't want any involvement really. But Claire and I are
mm,
friends, so I was up to date. I went and met the directors and went around to the production office here, and I met Jenna Coleman and the cast and everything. And Mum went and met. She lives in Point Lonsdale, where it was filmed
oh,
in
okay.
Victoria,
Yeah.
which was so nice that they said it in Glasgow and Point Lonsdale, exactly where I
Mm,
had in the book.
mm,
They don't usually, that doesn't happen. You can, they were talking about South Africa and places where tax breaks might have been better. But I
mm.
was so pleased that it was there in Point Lonsdale.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. Kelly is wondering, in Ash Mountain, which of your
Yeah.
characters left the most impression with you?
Oh, um, That's a really good question, because it's probably not Fran. I don't know. For a long time, I felt very close to the captain, and actually, people don't talk about him much in reviews and stuff. So I'm not sure anyone else got that. But my dad was a widower with a lot of
Oh,
children
okay.
when he met my mum,
Yeah.
and so I had parts of the captain. I called him the captain because our house was run like a tight ship, and he's a gorgeous widower. So I was very affectionate towards him, but it was probably Gramps, you know, and a lot of people find like even the ostriches, the things that they can't. Poor Ronnie Corbett, but Gramps was such a beautiful character because he was also a mixture of my dad. My dad was in him and Gramps.
Mm,
Just this lovely father and a great community man, and he's really struggling with being. He's had a stroke and he can't get
okay.
about. So,
Yeah.
yeah, he was probably my favourite. But I did try and feel affection for all of them. And Rosie and Bonnie and Dante I loved, and I did more than I probably have in any other book.
Okay.
And I think
Yeah.
that's because I said it in Kilmore, and I could feel the humour and the dark humour and the way people are just different there from here.
Yeah.
Scottish people are very different from Australian people in a lot of ways.
Well, and especially like Kilmore would be a lot different than maybe
Yeah.
cities in Australia as well, and
Yeah, it's true.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Patricia's wondering if you get to choose your titles.
I don't really, but lately I have. I think I've probably been better at choosing them. So my next book, I'm really hoping they don't change the title because I didn't know what the word meant either. But I think you can kind of work it out. Sororicide, which means sister murder.
Okay.
So I'm wondering what the publisher is going to say about that because I love the title so much that I'd be really disappointed. I don't get final say. No, Dead Lovely, absolutely. I called it the Little Girls, and I much preferred that, the Little Girls, and that's what it was called when it was translated into in Holland. But that had with Allen and Unwin. Actually, that was my very first publisher. Was Allen and Unwin and Faber, and Allen and Unwin dropped me after Dead Lovely because it did badly. But maybe that's because she made me change the title because she wanted a good word and a bad word. I'm like, okay, blood, da da da, and then a good word, lovely, da da, and Dead Lovely is a saying in Glasgow too. That's Dead Lovely. But that title was not chosen by me, and I wouldn't choose it again. And The Devil's Staircase. It'll be interesting to see. Like Viral is being worked on as a TV show. Actually 4 of my books are at the moment, and we won't call it Viral after this was about a sex incident in Magaluf with school leavers. But because of the pandemic, we won't call it that. We'll call it, there's a different title we'll have to work out.
Yeah.
So, none. I get no choice.
Yeah.
No choice.
But sometimes they chose yours.
Well, Ash Mountain I chose. Worst case scenario I chose. So my publishers, I think I just like my publishers more now. We get each other better. We're choosing the right titles. The Cry was my idea, definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kelly's saying she loves the cover of Ash Mountain. I'll show people.
Thank you very much.
I can see it in your background as well, but here it is again for people to see. Do you have any says in your cover?
No, but I do love that cover a lot. I think I'll rip my thingy out. Hang on, I've got one here. No, I haven't. There's different covers for Ash Mountain over here. We had a different cover. So, and it was actually a photograph taken by a guy in Port Macquarie. It was a real photograph. I'm just trying to see if I can see it, but I can't. Never mind.
Okay.
But yeah, I love the cover that they did, and it's really interesting to see how, like, when I was with a very traditional crime publisher, how they do it. It's what was the last big book? Make it the same colours, and if you liked such and such, you'll like. I like what these ones at Firm are doing. Because, this is just, I love it. I love it. Individual. Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you can tell us anything about the book you're working on at the moment.
Oh, well, I'm not very far on, but it is called Sororicide, and it's about, there's 2 main themes. One is that it's about adult sibling violence. So sisters turning on each other. A big influence of this is War of the Roses. But if you think of 2 sisters, it's kind of turning into toxic married couple. So, yeah, it's about adult sibling violence, considering the fact that so many children are staying at home with their parents until the age of 30. They have to. It's actually really hard for kids to move on from home. It's
Yeah.
really, really expensive. So that's one of the themes is that, and also that QAnon and conspiracy related theories are really tearing families apart, and then it's sort of spreading. It's mainly in America, but it's there's a lot. I know there's a lot in Australia and also coming over here. So I'm writing a story basically about a sister who returns home from Australia to Scotland. Her mum's Australian, and has these beliefs, and at a music festival she gets arrested trying to stop doing something that's absolutely that sounds absolutely bonkers, and it's put on an electronic tag, and she has to stay at home. So these two sisters are kind of forced living back together again, which I think a lot of people will relate to after lockdown, especially here. So it's kind of trying to talk about what adults and those two sisters just, their parents are like teenagers and the girls become like parents, and it's a very toxic and dangerous environment. Sort of put that together with her new beliefs and her new friends who are also waiting for this mad thing to happen. And yeah, it doesn't end well.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's so far what I've got.
Yeah. And did you start that during lockdown?
Yeah, but I started a different one altogether. The last two books I've written like half a book and then ditched it, and I've done that here too. And it was called The Sundowner, and it was about the grey nomads. A lot of homeless. There are a lot of homeless women over 55, and a lot of women who don't want to call it that and do all that they can to, so basically living in a van and travelling around. So I had started with a character who was older and who had been made homeless after her husband's death, and is, making the best of it and travelling around. Wrote half a book, thought, oh no, it's just not doing it for me, So she's now just a character in Sororicide at these, traveling here. And that happened in worst case scenario too. My main character was just one scene that I'd written out of about 40,000 words, and this woman who walked in, and I wrote it, and I thought, oh my God, she's it's all about her. Forget everything else, So yeah, I'm not very far on with it, and that tends to be because I take my time more now.
So
I've often gone down the wrong path. It's easy to do, in fact, when I wrote The Cry, I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Because I had the first third of it, which was, it's a dead child. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't, how can you sustain a book when you feel this way? And in comes Alexandra. That's why I thought, because I was going to do Joanna's point of view for the whole book, and I thought, I cannot do that. It's just too sad, So and in came Alexandra as another point of view.
Okay, yeah. So do you have many half-finished books?
No, not really. No, I don't think so. No, I tend to use them in, like I said, so the Grey Nomad one. No, she's just now a character. But I sometimes forget when I start a book how much you need for a book. You need lots. It's not just one idea. You need a good 100 big ideas, and that character, this place, that thing happens. So yeah, it probably wasn't a waste of time in either case, because I definitely got good characters out of writing 40,000 words of rubbish.
And I think Patricia mentioned, and I'm also wondering, what sort of things do you like to read yourself, and maybe if there's anything you've been reading lately that you'd like to recommend to us?
Yeah, actually, I've been in the crime genre. I get sent a lot of crime books, and I would have to say it's not usually my first choice, and because I get sent a lot of crime books and I'm busy reading them, I haven't been reading a lot else, and that's a bit disappointing. Also, I'm moving house and all sorts of things. So lately I haven't read very much, except one that's coming out soon. It's this Australian woman called Margaret Hickey, and her book is called Cutter's End. Okay. And if you like Dash Mountain, I think she's better than me, but you'll probably like this. It's a rural town, and it's a rip-roaring thriller, scary, great characters, brilliantly written. So I really liked that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. We're also wondering, do you read your reviews?
I used to. My very first review, because as I was saying before, my first publisher was Allen and Unwin, My
Mm.
first book came out in Australia. I came over to the Melbourne Festival and everything. I was so excited. My mum always wanted to be a writer. She was a literature teacher. So I come
Okay.
over and I was like gloriously returning. And my first review was from The Age, and it was like, basically, this is just the worst thing I've ever read in my life. It was the worst review, and I was devastated. And now I don't get devastated by bad reviews at all. I don't spend a lot of time reading them, no. In fact,
Yeah.
I've got a real reputation with my family here of throwing things out. I know that there's a lot still on the internet. For a while I kept, magazine things and stuff. I've thrown everything out. It's almost like a ritual. But yeah, I don't know, because it doesn't really help me reading, good or bad. I'm not bad and good. I feel the same discomfort about. I'm like, when someone's really nice, I'm like, what? No, that's not me. You're crazy. So yeah, I don't now. Basically, I skim and sometimes, but I don't. I don't read Amazon or anything like that.
And Cassie's wondering if you reread your books that you've written.
No, and that's why, because I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand to read any of them. It's like, even when I do a reading and have a page, I cut half of it out, and I
Oh,
think
really?
I rewrite it. Yeah, no, I haven't reread any of them, and that is also why I didn't want to do a series, because I thought if I had to do a series, I'd have to reread my books, and my books are terrible. No, they're great. A firm would hate me saying that, but it's just I have no interest in reading them at all. No.
And you said that your husband's a writer as well. Do you find that you read each other's, like as you're going through writing your novels, and that you read each other?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't imagine. I definitely wouldn't have finished anything if I hadn't. And I think it might be the same for him. We have helped each other enormously. Absolutely, we read each other's.
Yeah, that's
It's
great.
a ritual at the end of every day almost, that before sending anything off, we would both read it, and we're very honest with each other. So yeah, we do. It's so lucky to have that. If you can find a writer buddy who will
Yeah.
listen to your boring ideas, and have some ideas. If you're someone who takes on input, I think you have to be as a writer.
Yeah.
That is invaluable. I've been so lucky to have him. I'm really we love it.
That's
We
great.
work together.
Yeah,
All the
that's
time. I
great.
would say we've kind of co-written everything. Really, I mean, worst case scenario, when I was unwell and in bed, he would help me get up and just pound out a paragraph, and then he would read it out loud to me and say, "See, I told you it was good." And I'm like, "Oh, that does sound all right. Okay, that's going in." So I mean, help is an understatement. He's amazing.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah. Could you tell us what you think makes a good story?
Um, I don't. Yeah, what makes a good story? I think it's a character is much more important to me than anything else, and so I think first and foremost, if you can put someone on a page who the person reading to can somehow think, oh, you know what, I totally get that. That's me. I've been, the number of people who really related to the crying baby on the plane, when there's so much else going on in my books, but it's the crying baby on the plane, those little moments where readers can actually feel like they are the character. I think that's what makes a good story. When you feel what the character feels when you read it, or what you imagine the character would be feeling. Something that makes you feel anything. I read books that leave me cold. And it's surprising that to read something where you think, that I love that. It's giving me. So I think it's a good story has to produce feeling in the reader or the viewer.
Yeah. Yeah. Just reminding people before we finish off, if you've got any more questions, please type them in and you'll have a chance to win a copy of Ash Mountain. Could you tell people watching how they can keep up with what's happening with you?
Oh, yes, not by my blog. My first publisher made me do that, and I haven't sort of updated it for 20 years, so not by that. But I'm on Twitter, so at Fitzhelen, Fitzhelen, at Fitzhelen. Yeah, that's the best way.
Yeah.
So I don't think Aussies use Twitter as much as we do here. But I'm not sure. If you're on Twitter, it'd be great to hear from you. And I really loved all the questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, there's been some great questions. Thanks. And thanks for joining us. And thanks everyone who joined in and the questions that you asked. and hopefully we might be able to see you another time.
Oh, I would love to. Hopefully, I'll get over there next year
Yeah.
in person. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Jackie, and thanks
Yeah.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.